Welcome, and my name is Dora Argitai. I am one of the co-founders of Animal Rebellion and currently working as relationships coordinator, and really excited to host this call tonight with some incredible speakers I'm going to introduce in a bit. This is an extraordinary time. Just about a year ago, we couldn't have had this call between the core of the environmental movement and the animal people, the animal movement, and the broader movement of movements. And now today, here we are talking about interconnected issues together after an incredible year, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So kudos to all of you who have been involved and those of you who are inspired and want to get involved. This is the time because we are starting 2023 really, really strong. But before we go off for Christmas vacation that I think many of us are looking forward to and take some rest, we wanted to come together with you and talk about what Christmas means to us and all of us really, and talk about what we can do about that in the next year. So I'm imagining in my head this classic image that you're all familiar with of Christmas under the tree, elves singing to each other, making toys, dinner tables filled with all kinds of delicious food, and also the fire and the candle. But as with every narrative, the reality is very, very different. Sweatshops are filled with individuals being worked on the bone to ensure overseas quota in exchange for pittance. Dinner tables are covered with dead animals for social media clouds, and even Father Christmas himself is, well, shall I not say, he portrays the wealthy, yes, by traveling around with his private jet. Well, anyway, so jokes apart, when it comes to animals, Christmas is synonymous with cruelty, with over 10 million turkeys bred for Christmas every year. And many of them, as you may or may not know, spend their entire lives in crowded industrial factory farm sheds before eventually being slaughtered. And that's not just turkeys. Christmas is a time of indulgence, as you all know, with much of the population feasting on a variety of different meats and other animal products, sometimes hidden. As we know, dairy milk is hidden in every single product, pretty much all over the range. So how can it be even fair? And we can also see how the UK government thinks about Christmas and the spirit of Christmas when it comes to our lives and the lives of all the beings that we share this planet with. Because during this time, instead of preparing for a healthy 2023 for the population of the Earth, they are opening coal mines, and that's where they're putting their energy and money into. That's what they are voting for. So instead of giving us coal for Christmas, they are decimating our chances for securing a livable future. And if we look at science, and we have had a lot of that this year, the United Nations stated that there is no credible pathway staying under 1.5 degrees of warming, which, as we all so painfully know, has been the limit of safety defined by the UN. James Hansen, for example, who is one of the world's most prolific climate scientists, has said that we are likely to breach 1.5 degrees of warming by 2024. So that is 2024, due to the El Nino effect. And that brings with it a cascade of tipping points leading to famine, unbelievable temperature, as we have seen this year in the UK as well, and mass migration. Already, we are facing a cost of living crisis that's coming out of the news channels, whatever news channel you turn on, and the energy crisis, with people nationwide having to choose between heating and eating. A political choice trying to ensure the survival of neoliberalism over survival of the people. This is the trend we have seen in the past decades, but increasingly this year through the cost of living crisis and energy crisis. And this is also hugely reinforced by the UK having the least energy efficient homes in the whole of Europe, which is catastrophic. But on the other hand, as I said at the beginning, 2022 has been a momentous year for the climate and animal movement. In Animal Rebellion, for example, which Rose is going to speak about more in a short while. We have pulled off our biggest campaign yet, the Plant-Based Future campaign, where we stopped the supply of dairy in the UK, leading to milk shortages and hundreds of arrests. We also freed beagles this last summer from an animal testing breeding facility, the first time anything similar has been done since the 90s. And if you have been following the news lately, you might have seen footages from our latest restaurant sit-in going absolutely viral. I have a statistic I want to share with you. We had 2.8 million printed news mentions, which is a number we have never seen before. So we also disrupted the Queen's Jubilee and launched the Plant-Based Universities campaign in over 40 UK universities, and set a series of milk poor action as well, which also went viral, just to name a few of the things that we have been doing. And we are preparing with an incredible campaign for 2023. Just Stop Oil, amazing and incredible movement that started off only, I can't remember when you started, a year ago, a year and a half. And in such a short space of time, we achieved incredible recognition. Had a very busy year. Since April, GSO supporters have been arrested over 2,000 times, with over 50 people placed on remand. And to name a few of the actions that Just Stop Oil has done this year, oil terminals have been shut down, bridges have been blocked, art galleries have been redecorated, motorways have been closed, and tabloids have had an absolute meltdown because of all of this. And also actions are taking place every single day in October, have been taking place with Animal Rebellion and also Extinction Rebellion sort of joining this whirlwind of action, creating a really, really big season for action. And by having an understanding on the present global suffering combined with the suffering yet to come, sometimes it feels like a curse to be alive today and to have to deal with all of this. And we are actually incredibly privileged to be in the position to act. We have been given the chance to stick our heads above the waves of the sea of blood known as normality. And this means we can see there's another world that exists outside of this mass suffering. Another world that secures a livable future and allows all living creatures to exist in harmony without tipping the balance. And that would be a place of love, peace, and community. And this is why it is a privilege, because it gives us the power to know that we can change the direction of the tide. But this privilege comes with a moral imperative to ensure that we must change the tide. And for now, we know exactly what will happen if we don't. So we as individuals and as a collective have the power to change this if only we understand what to do. And we must do that with love and peace and community at the forefront of our minds. And that's exactly what we are going to do and have been doing. And we also must be the contrast against the current suffering. Otherwise, we shall never reach this better world. And so it is my honor and privilege to now introduce our speakers. And I'm really excited that they were able to join us tonight. First, we are going to hear from Peter Singer, Dr. Peter Singer, who is a world-renowned professor of bioethics and philosopher, and very well known and respected in many communities, including the vegan community, which is where I learned about you, Peter, from. And also, we are going to have Max Weiss after, environmental engineer and spokesperson for the incredible Climate Safe movement. After Max, Sean Davies, also known as Bruce, is going to speak. He's an organizer working with climate and trade union movements. Really exciting. And after Bruce, Rose Patterson is going to speak from Animal Rebellion to get you excited about our campaigns for 2023 and also what's going on. And then lastly, we are going to have Gabby Ditton to speak about Just Stop Oil, what's happening, what's coming up, and all the exciting stuff. So without further ado, I am going to pass it on to Peter Singer to start us off.
Thanks very much, Doris, for that introduction. It's great to have the chance to speak to you, and it's also great to have that introduction telling us about all of the good things that are happening, all of the activities. And that's certainly what we need, because although there's been a lot more discussion and various initiatives that have been taken, it's clear that things are not changing fast enough, either for preventing catastrophic climate change or for reducing the immense amount of animal suffering that is going on. And I want to stress the fact that there is a harmony between these two particular movements. I've been involved in the animal movement since 1970, really, when I first learned about factory farming, and my eyes were opened and I was told that no, the animals I was eating were not all out on green fields, moving around freely and having a good life, at least until the day they were killed. But already then, large numbers of them were indoors in dark sheds, crowded together, deprived of all of the ability to have their natural movements and social life and instincts, and that all of this was really unnecessary because we don't need to eat them, and it's not even an efficient way of feeding the world to confine animals indoors and then have to grow food to feed them, which they use most of the food value up just in running around as far as they can move around, or keeping their bodies warm. So that's what got me into the animal movement. And obviously in 1970, I was completely unaware of climate change. I don't think anybody was talking about it. Certainly nobody that I knew was talking about it. It actually took another 14 years before I learned that climate change was happening, that it was caused by human activity, by fossil fuels, essentially, and that this was likely to be a serious ethical problem, a problem for a lot of the world, and of course an ethical problem because we in the affluent countries were contributing the vast majority of the greenhouse gases, but the worst effects were going to be on people living in poverty, farmers who are subsistence farmers who are trying to grow their crops where the rainfalls were going to change or were going to get affected by droughts and floods. And it was even, it wasn't even in 1984, I still didn't connect my concern for animals with my concern for climate, because at that stage, everybody was talking about burning fossil fuels. And it was only another, I'm not sure exactly how long, but certainly several more years before people started talking about the fact that meat, and particularly red meat and dairy, was a major contributor to climate change through the emission of methane, greenhouse gases. There was some debate about how you calculate the impact of methane. Is it 27 times as impactful as CO2? That's the figure if you take a 100-year scale, but given that we don't really have 100 years to reduce climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that's actually an underestimate in terms of the timescale that we need to work on. So I think even now people who use that figure are underestimating the impact of methane on the next 20 years, because methane, the reason this makes a difference is that methane breaks down much more quickly than CO2. So, arguably it's 100 times or more than that as potent as CO2. And that means, with apologies to Just Stop Oil, which is a great movement, and we do need to stop oil, of course, but just stopping oil is not going to do the trick, unfortunately, because even if we did phase out all oil, or let's say, we phase out all fossil fuels, meat consumption is continuing to rise, and it's rising particularly in countries that used to be relatively poorer, where people couldn't afford meat, and now they are affording more meat. So meat consumption is rising most rapidly in China and other parts of East Asia, and in some other countries where it's good that people are getting less poor, but it's going to be catastrophic if it simply increases meat production and therefore accelerates climate change. So these movements really work together in the same direction. That if we do want to get on top of our contributions to to climate change, then we have to do something about meat production, and that means we have to do something about meat consumption, really, the demand for meat. And this is a big task, but I was glad to hear, Dora, in what you were saying in introducing things, that you're talking about movements for plant-based foods, for example, in universities and in any institutions that anybody is associated with. That's really important. I think it's essential that we continue and encourage that movement. And we need to scale this up, because at the moment, although there certainly are quite attractive plant-based foods around, they're more expensive typically. At least I'm talking about the new products are more expensive than meat. Of course, the old plant-based foods like lentils are still very cheap, especially if you buy them in bulk dried. So they're around, but we need to encourage more people to use them. And I think that that's an essential component of both reducing the suffering of animals and reducing the contribution we're making to climate change. Now, in terms of tactics, I've wondered over the years, when I first got interested in this, and when it first started to become well known during the 80s that we were causing climate change, I wondered how essentially quietly that issue was being advanced. And I contrast this with the period of the 1970 and even early 1960s, when the Vietnam War was a major issue where I was. I was a university undergraduate in Australia. Australia was conscripting young men of my age for Vietnam. And there was a huge protest against the Vietnam War. There were 20, 30, 40,000 people in the streets, blocking streets up against the Vietnam War. And of course, in the United States, that was happening when I came to Oxford, although the UK was not sending troops to Vietnam, but still there were very substantial protests there too. And yet, terrible as the Vietnam War was, climate change, if it continues, is going to cause far, far greater loss of life and human suffering, and is, of course, also going to cause extinction of many species, and is going to have lasting effects for centuries. So by any standards that you can think of, climate change is a much bigger issue, a much greater harm than the Vietnam War was. And yet there isn't that kind of scale of movement, and there isn't the kind of civil disobedience movement that I think was effective in changing US policy and eventually in Australian too, on the Vietnam War. So I'm glad to see that this is increasing, that there are more actions. I think they need to be carefully planned actions to show public support, to show the sincerity of the people involved. I think there are lessons to be learned from studying the civil disobedience activities of Gandhi in India and of Martin Luther King in the United States, and trying to get that sort of movement out there to really show widespread support. And unfortunately, we can see now that governments are responding in a pretty draconian way. I imagine you're aware that in my native Australia, a protester was just sentenced to 15 months in prison for blocking one lane of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It looks like governments may increasingly react in this way. And the only way to prevent that, I think, is to not simply have a single or a handful of protesters out there, but to really try to get large numbers out there that the police are not going to be able to arrest or process the number of people that are out there getting arrested. And that's what happened during the Vietnam protests. So I think we really need to work to build the numbers in this movement and to have the kind of impact that civil disobedience can have under these circumstances. So I don't want to take more time. I know that there's a lot of speakers up there, but I'll certainly be looking to see what else is happening in the movement and to see other ways in which I can support, continue to support both the animal movement and the movement against climate change. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. It was amazing to hear your thoughts on the subject and also to have your support and have you with us today. Thanks so much for coming again. And I hope you will stay. And yes, if you have to go, obviously that's understood. And thank you so much again. So just to remind you all, throughout this call, we are going to be reposting ways you can get involved with either Just Stop Oil or Animal Rebellion, who are the two hosts of this event tonight. And one way you can get involved is to donate. What we request is that you would donate us a once a month donation, which would be an hour of your earnings. And that will help us to mobilize people across the country and raise the funds that we both need in both movements to be able to sustain the work that we have been doing over the past years. And Ed is sharing this link in the chat, or he has shared already. Another way you can support us is by joining us. All of us are volunteers in both movements. We all had a different life before, and so we very much welcome you to join us and join this as a community, not just as an activity. So we're also sharing in the chat ways you can sign up, and you're going to receive a phone call within the next 24 hours or so. We're going to get in touch and talk to you about how you would like to get involved. There are many options. And yes, so with that, I would like to pass this on to our next speaker, who is going to be Max Weiss from Munich, Germany. And he is an environmental engineer. He quit this job at the beginning of this year to do activism full time. So really inspirational. He also went to COP27, which was an eye-opening and shocking experience. And he's going to talk about that and many other things right now. To you, Max.
Thank you very much, Dora. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, so I will be talking about animal agriculture's impact on climate change and other planetary boundaries. And I will also briefly be touching the subject of food security, because our agricultural system at the moment is very much endangering food security all over the planet. And yeah, let's get right to it. This is basically the core reason why using animals in agriculture is very unsustainable. And it's about energy conversion between trophic levels. Sounds complicated. It's actually quite simple. What is a trophic level? It's a hierarchical level in an ecosystem, and it shows the position of an organism in a food web. So when we look at the bottom here, we see producers being plants, and they store chemical energy from the sun and provide it to primary consumers, which are mostly animals used in agriculture and ideally us humans. And when we move to the second level, so the secondary consumers, so when we eat animals, we are accepting energy losses in the range of 90%. So this is a rule of thumb. It's a principle in nature, which we can never bypass. And this energy is being lost through basically the metabolism of the animals, the building of the skeleton. So yeah, 90% of it is being lost to the environment through respiration, digestion, and excretion. So what this means is when we want to have a lot of the 10% for the secondary consumers, we get much more of the 90%. So this being climate damaging gases, we need a lot of land, we need a lot of fertilizer, and on another level, we need a lot of subsidies to keep the system going, for example. And yeah, this is basically the core reason why animal agriculture is so destructive, so problematic, causing so many problems and being incredibly wasteful as well. And a simple way of putting it is animals are just really highly inefficient bioreactors. Don't get me wrong, animals are wonderful, but on a physical level, they're just not very good at converting nutrients. And currently we're using 75 to 80 billion of these highly inefficient bioreactors, and that's causing a lot of damage. And one of the most shocking correlations where we see this is when we look at the use of our global agricultural land. This is from a landmark study from the Oxford University. Probably many of you have heard of it. And yeah, it's mind-blowing, really. We're using 83% of our agricultural land for animal products. And this, in turn, supplies us with 18% of global calories. And then if we look at it the other way, 17% of the land we're using for agriculture supplies us with more than 80% of global calories. And this is just absolutely mind-boggling. And it leads to incredible injustices like we're seeing right now in Eastern Africa. Our motto tonight is starving around the Christmas tree. And yeah, people are starving there. These are just very recent headlines. And yeah, when we look at my country, for example, Germany, we feed 2/3 of our grain harvest. We use it to feed it to animals. And also when we look at the grain ships that just recently were able to leave Ukrainian harbors again, they didn't go to the Horn of Africa where people are starving. They went to Spain, France, and Germany to supply the animal industry with cheap animal feed. And yeah, so this is a crime against humanity of epic proportions. And I'm not even talking about the animals here. And obviously it's also, there's a strong linkage to climate change because in East Africa, we are seeing a very, very bad drought. And so let's have a look at what the Oxford study is saying about climate change and animal agriculture's contribution to it. So this is, in my opinion, probably the most reasonable number out there at the moment. They come to the conclusion that a plant-based food system would save 28% of global emissions. And there's basically 4 positions here. We have direct CO2 emissions from forest fire clearings. So when forests are being burned down, and then obviously also the direct fossil fuels emissions for fertilizer production and transportation and so on. Then we have direct nitrous oxide emissions. It's a very, very potent greenhouse gas that is being created by the decomposition of manure and chemical fertilizer. Then we have carbon opportunity costs, very important. So when we're using the land that we could grow forests on, for example, instead for farming animals, it's we're missing out big time. And then we have methane emissions, and yeah, Peter already touched on the subject, explained it very well. I'm gonna touch on it on the next slide because it's really, really important. And then another interesting aspect and also shocking aspect is the fishing industry. What about fishing? Just last year, a study from the famous magazine Nature found out that just one fishing method, bottom trawling, incredibly destructive. And so it means stirring up the seafloor in a big way, and it causes as much carbon emissions as total global aviation. Really, really crazy. And that's not even in these studies, so there's still a lot of science that needs to be done on this. Yeah, and then about methane, the climate emergency is really a methane emergency. And this graphic might be a bit overwhelming, but I really just want you to focus on the 2 orange bars on the top. And so what this shows is a change in global surface temperature after a 1-year pulse in present day emissions. So the heating up of our global surface after we expose it to 1 year of current emissions. So what we're seeing here is that the response after 10 years because of methane is very, very large. And then when we look at it after 100 years, it's almost disappearing. And this is exactly what Peter already said. It's when we're using the global warming potential of methane over 100 years, we're really not considering the full damage potential of methane. As it's decomposing after about 11 to 12 years, it does a lot of, it's very, very potent in its first phase. And then if we're using a time horizon of 100 years, we're watering down the effect very much. So 100 years, the global warming potential of methane is about 30. Then if we look at a time horizon of 20, it's already up to 80. And then if we look at the instantaneous global warming potential, so in every single given moment, the ability of a methane molecule to trap heat in the atmosphere, it's up to 150. So this is really, really important. And the animal industry and the oil industry, they really want us to use this time horizon of 100 years, because that's really, it's watering down the destructive effects of this molecule. And so that's something that we have to be aware of. And a famous IPCC scientist, lead reviewer, he says cutting methane is our best and probably last hope to keep the planet safe. So it's a very, very important lever. If we want to have direct cooling effects, we have to decrease methane emissions as fast as possible. Okay, and then generally, when we're talking about animal agriculture, it's really important to not only focus on climate change and climate damaging emissions. It's very important to also focus on other planetary boundaries. Planetary boundaries is a concept introduced by the Stockholm Center for Resilience, and they represent 9 different processes that regulate the stability and resilience of the Earth system. And animal agriculture is impacting 4 of them in a major way. So we see that climate change, biodiversity, land use change, and biogeochemical flows are already exceeded very strongly, and novel entities, which are like plastic pollution, heavy metals, and so on. But let's focus on the other 4. And climate change and biodiversity, they are planetary boundaries that can single-handedly make our planet uninhabitable, and they are reinforcing each other. And then land use change is a really, really important metric when we want to look at general environmental destruction. 3/4 of land use change currently are happening because of animal agriculture. And then also a very strongly exceeded boundary is the biogeochemical flows, more commonly known as nitrogen and phosphorus emissions. And this is also mainly impacted by animal agriculture. And they are really poisoning our groundwater, destroying waterways, and causing massive ocean dead zones. Okay, and so lastly, I want to present to you the Animal and Climate Save's environmental campaign. It's called the Plant-Based Treaty. It's a roadmap towards a plant-based food system and a roadmap for exiting animal production, really. And yeah, so the 3 principles are relinquish, stop the problem from increasing, getting worse. So no more land use change, including deforestation for animal agriculture, no more factory farms, then redirect, eliminate the driving forces behind the problem. So this is really about stopping the incredibly damaging subsidies that are going into animal agriculture, and promote plant-based foods and actively transition away from our current food system. And then, very importantly, third principle is restore, actively rewild nature. As you saw, because we use so much land for animal agriculture, there's huge potential in rewilding, drawing down carbon, and stopping the methane emergency, and also stopping the collapse of biodiversity. And yeah, so it's a bottom-up pressure grassroots campaign run by very dedicated people all over the planet. And we obviously don't engage in civil disobedience, but we focus on lobbying, petitioning, raising awareness, and outreach on many, many different levels. So from individual to local councils to governmental levels. And one of our biggest successes so far was the endorsement of Los Angeles. So that means basically they commit to, for example, serving more plant-based foods in their public institutions like schools, hospitals, jails, and so on. Yeah, and then another success in the UK was the endorsement of Hayward's Heath. And yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. That was incredible and amazing to see all of these facts together at once. And I just wanted to remind everybody who's watching this that if you could not remember everything that Max said, you can find this presentation after the call on the Just Stop Oil YouTube channel. So you can revisit and use this knowledge when you speak to people about why a plant-based food system is so important. And definitely check out the Plant-Based Treaty and Climate Save and follow them wherever you can, because they're doing some amazing work. So thanks so much again, Max, for coming to talk about that. Next, I'm really excited to introduce Bruce Davies, who is just an outstanding person doing everything in the world. So he's an organizer working with Just Stop Oil, Exile Trade Unions, People's Assembly, and the United Unions Community Branch, amongst others. And he has been active in the environmental movement since 2019, but he's now focusing on how we can build a much broader anti-establishment movement, a people's movement, essentially, pushing for wholesale system change and how environmental issues fit into that. So I will pass it on to you, Bruce.
Thanks a lot for having me. Really, really pleased to be here tonight. I've just come off a call whereby we were discussing as climate activists how we can build this much broader anti-establishment movement, something that looks at the bigger picture and that is intersectional, and how as part of that venture we can support the nurses who are going out on strike tomorrow. So first thing I want to say is get out and support the nurses tomorrow. There'll be picket lines all over the country. Those nurses, let's remind ourselves of what they did for us during the pandemic, right? Let's remind ourselves of how crucial they are, how much of a crucial part they play in the fabric of society, and how much they're getting shit on right now. We clapped them, didn't we? They clapped them outside Downing Street during the pandemic. How fucking pathetic. And now they're not even coming to the table to negotiate a pay rise at all. So I'll drop a link in later regarding like all the locations for the demos tomorrow. But please get out there and support the nurses tomorrow. Take along placards and banners with messages of solidarity from the climate movement. They'll really appreciate it. So yeah, what I'm definitely not going to do tonight is deliver some facts and figures. yeah, education and truth telling is important, but it's nowhere near enough, right? As campaigners and climate conscious folk, we are very, very aware of this, right? So I'm here tonight to talk about a bigger picture and how we can perhaps more effectively build something that really has revolutionary potential. We're doing some really important work, right? We are doing some really fucking inspiring things, and we ought to show ourselves and others in our community, people on this call, a lot of love. We deserve a lot of love. We deserve a lot of credit. We're doing some hard shit. But as always, I'm always thinking, right, what next? How do we effectively build? So we've got an opportunity now over the next few weeks to have a break, a really well-earned break, and an opportunity to reflect, to regroup, to regenerate, and consider our next steps. We deserve credit, but let's not give ourselves too much of a pat on the back, right? So I'm not going to talk just about building the JSO or XR or AR community tonight. I'm going to talk about how we view our groups and campaigns as just one part of building a much bigger community. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that we need wholesale system change, and we need it quickly. It's fucking urgent, right? The next couple of years, absolutely crucial. Our life support machine being switched on and the continuation of a livable planet in the near future, and animals being treated as sentient beings and not just fucking murdered en masse, it's just simply not compatible with the current system that we're living in, a system of profit over everything else. This is what it comes back to, all of it. That's exactly why we're heading in the wrong direction. That's exactly why the COP conference fails year after year after year after year. That's why, despite meat consumption being down in the UK and other European countries globally, it's on the rise. I hate to break it to you folks, but that's the truth. This system isn't based on supply and demand. They create the demand and always find somewhere to sell the product. And they do it by psychologically manipulating us with their very effective marketing campaigns. This system doesn't have what it takes. It won't do anything to threaten its ideologies and its motives. We also have a huge wealth disparity issue, right? The sour fruits of which are now being laid bare by the cost of living crisis. The system exploits people just as much as it does the planet in a whole multitude of ways. If we take slaughterhouse workers, for example, right? They're often very, very psychologically damaged by their work. I wouldn't be surprised if suicide rates are really high in that sector, in that industry. And they're often paid poorly, and they often depend on migrant workers and to pay them poorly because no one will do it. No one wants to do it. But do you think the corporations care? Of course they fucking don't. Do you think the bosses who are so far removed from the actual work give a damn? So the system is the crisis. We've got to get out of these single issues. And because all the issues that we face are just symptoms of the system. It's not broken, this system, by the way. How often do you hear that? Oh, the system's broken. We're all getting fucked. No, it's working exactly as it was designed to. The super rich have never done so well, right? They're getting richer and richer and richer and more powerful as the majority of us get poorer and poorer and poorer and less powerful and more oppressed. So the history of revolution, the history of revolutionary change, the history of real meaningful social change tells us that the material mental conditions of enough people have to get seriously bad first. And not only affecting the working class, but it also has to start affecting the middle class. There's this saying that a crisis isn't treated like a crisis until it starts affecting the middle class. So it takes for these conditions to arise before enough people are unified enough around a common cause and a common identity to build something that is capable of a potentially revolutionary moment. And we now have this opportunity, right? Yeah, the cost of living crisis is shit, but there's nothing like a good crisis to bring around real meaningful change. As horrible as that sounds, that is the reality. And I'm super glad that the climate movement is addressing the cost of living crisis more in the messaging these days. And we've seen the rise of strike action this year, right? And it feels like it's kind of come out of nowhere, but it's really not. And strikes are sexy again. They're popular. Like, who would have thought that something so disruptive could be so popular? And it's because people relate to the struggle, because they're going through the same struggle themselves. It's not like, you know, it's not difficult to grasp. And the way that the union leaders have so successfully handled the media, and the way that we've done such incredible work in being persistent and courageous and putting on pressure. 2022 really has been the year of mass political education, right? All of a sudden, your average Joe is waking up to the injustices of the system. We have a massive opportunity here to join the dots, to build powerful alliances across various movements, and something that really can be revolutionary. I'm guessing most of us in the room know this guy, Andreas Malm, right? But just for those who don't, he's the author of this book called How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And it's basically what it says on the tin. He's advocating for sabotage of fossil fuel infrastructure. But even he, who advocates for such hardcore tactics, states in that book, we are too many and too manifold to fit into one boat. The only vessel that can make room for the level of participation that is required to win this fight of our lives is a diversity and plurality of tactics. Yes, this will open for internal tensions. We've all experienced that one, right? But no movement that has altered the course of history has managed without that. It's always been there. There is something suspicious about total tactical conformity, he says. So to this I say, yeah, Andreas, bang on. But so long as it's disruptive, right? You know, we're way past the days of petitions and shit, right? And it has to create enough pressure. The system is this big monster. It's got all these pressure points. And unless we press on enough of them at the same time, it will easily survive. It will adapt. It will evolve. So, you know, imagine something that can combine the tactics that we employ in the climate direct action movement, tongue twister, with mass strike action, with refusal to pay energy bills. You know, that's kicking off now with Don't Pay. People are realizing their power. One of the most inspiring moments I had this year was not from the climate direct action movement, though there was many of those, and October was fucking thrilling, was visiting a picket line, an RMT picket line in Manchester, back in July or something, back in the summer when it first kicked off. I was chatting to one of the workers. I asked him, we got talking about his job, and he just loved his job. He was so thrilled to have a job that was such an important public service. And I said to him, is this the first time you've been on strike? And he said yes. I knew he'd say yes, because it's the same for 99% of them. I said, how does it feel? He said, I feel powerful. And he had this twinkle in his eye. And then I said, do you feel rebellious? And that twinkle in the eye stayed there, and he said, yes, absolutely. And this was really an emotional moment for me, because this wasn't an activist. This wasn't someone who's as politicized as we all are in this room. This was just an ordinary guy working at Manchester Piccadilly Station who realized his power. And that's what we have now. 1.5 million people going on strike this month in this country. Trade union membership on the rise. People recognizing their power across the board. So we've got to join the dots. But we've got to be in each other's pockets all the time, right? We need to get involved with all sorts of political activity on a local level. We need to be the climate people that are always there. Because if we don't turn up, they won't talk about climate. It's still kind of like a fringe thing for the left. A lot of them find it overwhelming as well. So we've got to continuously be there. We've got to cross-fertilize. We've got to build deep relationships. We've got to build trust and intense camaraderie. Join the dots, bring all the struggles together, and put our similarities above our differences always. So hope that gave you some food for thought. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Wow, Bruce, thank you so much for speaking so passionately and so honestly about what you observed as working with trade unions. And yeah, we definitely wanted to have this section in this talk today because this is such a big part of what is going to happen in 2023 and onwards. So yeah, really thanks for everything you brought again. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, which is Rose Patterson from Animal Rebellion. She's an incredible person and also a great friend of mine. So really, really happy and excited to get her to speak in a few seconds. And she has been an animal justice activist since 2012. Incredible past. And has been a part of many organizations working on the front line for the animals and continuing today. And she joined Animal Rebellion Actions team 3 years ago. She has been a core member ever since and designed and coordinated dozens of actions and has also worked on actions for Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil. So a real superstar, Rose, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here as well. It's really great to collaborate with Just Stop Oil as well. Yeah, lots of people in Animal Rebellion have worked on Just Stop Oil actions or like taken part in their actions. I think it's so important for everyone to support each other and vice versa as well. We always have loads of JSO people coming to support us. So yeah, I guess, yeah, as Dora mentioned at the beginning of this call, Animal Rebellion has been really busy this year. We disrupted the Queen's Jubilee. We liberated 5 beagles from a breeding facility and saved them from going on to be tested on. We openly said that we would go and stop the supply of dairy, and we did for almost 2 weeks. Unfortunately, the Queen died in the middle of our campaign, which messed up a few things. And then we went on to, yeah, cause havoc in supermarkets and with pouring milk on the floor. And also, a lot of people may not realize while this was going on, we also had a team going out, call it the Farmer Dialogue team. So they were going out into farming communities, speaking to farmers while we were doing these actions as well, which I think is something really important. And that's something we're going to continue because we'll never achieve a plant-based food system without farmers transitioning to plant-based farming. So yeah, everything we do is like completely open, as most people probably know, because we know we're doing the right thing and we've got nothing to hide. So you know, feel yeah, we're kind of trying to transform the animal movement as well as yeah, linking animal agriculture and climate change as well, and bringing like animal movement and climate movement together. So we're acting as like that link between the two. And obviously we're inspired by previous social justice movements. For example, like our current restaurant sit-ins that you may have seen. So we're targeting high-end restaurants all over the UK. So this is a national campaign that we're doing at the moment, which you can sign up to join. Where yeah, they're based on blood counter sit-ins during the civil rights movement in the US. I'm sure a lot of you already know about those. So yeah, that was where Black and some white activists, students sat down to eat at segregated lunch counters. So they would only serve white people or allow white people to sit at the lunch counters. So Black people go to sit at those lunch counters, showing exactly what they want to see in the world and like positive visioning, I suppose. And so that's where the inspiration for our lunch counter, our restaurant sit-ins came from. And so, like I said, this is a national campaign. This Saturday, we've got sit-ins happening all over the country. We've got one in the Northeast, I believe Birmingham, Bristol, London, I think Southampton as well, taking part. So yeah, if you want to get us involved in those, it's literally just going in, peacefully sitting in these high-end restaurants, and they represent these exploitative industries. Obviously, they're exploiting animals, the people that work in these places, and the food they're serving is also destroying the planet. Some of these places even refuse to serve plant-based meals as well, which is pretty shocking. And so, but yeah, one of the most exciting thing I want to talk to you about is, and this is something that we haven't actually mentioned openly yet, our next campaign for next year. Still ironing out a few things, so I can't give away too many details, but we're planning on focusing more on the animal message. So we'll be focusing a lot on probably animal rescues. So as you saw, we were successful earlier this year when we rescued 5 beagles, and it was just like a really, really positive action. So our plan is to do more of these kind of actions, more positive, hope-based actions. I feel like a lot of people in Animal Rebellion are tired of being locked on to each other in the road for hours and on end, or going to these industrial estates in the middle of the night and climbing up silos and things. And we really, really feel like we need some positivity, particularly in the animal movement. And as I guess like when I first started, became like an activist about 10 years ago, I remember thinking one day someone's going to start something big for the animals, and then like XR came along in April 2019, and I was like, oh my god, like I hope in the next few years someone does this for the animals. And it's just like, I think it's got to be us, like me and the rest of the team, because basically nothing's happening. And we're hoping to, or we will, transform like the current animal movement, mass mobilize people to take these kind of actions. Like traditionally, as many people know, rescues are normally like covert actions, people going in like balaclava clad. We want to remove that stereotype and go in like proudly rescuing these animals. And I guess we want to ask people and society as a whole to question how they live their lives and who they want to be. And we're supposed to be a nation of animal lovers, and we believe that the public will be on our side. And we're basically asking to be put in front of a jury, and we believe that the public wouldn't find us guilty for saving some lives. And I guess how we treat animals is fundamental to who we are as a society and our relationship to the natural world as well. So if we solve the animal crisis, we'll make huge progress in the climate crisis as well. Animal freedom means freedom for everyone, like the planet and everyone on it. I guess our big ask today is for people to sign up and take action with us, come and rescue some animals with us, or come do a restaurant sit-in as a really, really easy action to come and get involved in. And if you can't do either of those things, then please donate to us. And we've got a really generous donor who's going to match every donation. So if you donate £10, that will be doubled by our donor as well. Anything would help. But I'll pass back to you, Dora.
Thank you so much, Rose. I am super excited for next year because, like you said, if this plan is going to happen, that's going to transform everything and make massive progress at all fronts. So can't wait. And thank you so much for everything that you do, Rose. And so I lost my notes, but I'm going to try to wing this. So basically, our last speaker is going to join us, and we left someone incredible to the end. And she is Gabby Ditton, who is a non-violent resistor from Norwich, who's been on the front lines of climate resistance in the UK for 3 years. If you have been involved in any way, I'm sure you know her face. She is just incredible and massively inspired me and many, many others. And yesterday she was found guilty of criminal damage by a jury for breaking windows at 97k worth at a bank, at the Barclays Bank in April 2021. You might remember the action. And she will be sentenced on the 27th of January in 2023, expected to receive a prison sentence between 6 to 18 months. So please welcome Gabby, who is our last speaker. Passing this on to you, Gabby.
Bloody hell, no pressure. It was last week was the Barclays thing, but I just about stopped thinking about it. Now you've mentioned it again, it's fine. So I thought I was supposed to be the nice, normal, relatable person to speak, but oh well. I've done lots of actions with Just Stop Oil and one action with Animal Rebellion, which was incredible. I absolutely believe that civil disobedience is the best way to bring about rapid social change. And that's not me saying that, that's the social science experts. I think Erica Chenoweth, who I can't read any of her books because it's all really like academic language, but I can read some of the highlights. And she said, which I've read in court, civil disobedience is not only the moral choice, it's also the most powerful way of shaping world politics by a long way. So although it's quite scary and it's very intimidating, what choice do we have at the point of history that we're at? And for a long time, I thought that it was going to be other people that were going to do that it would be the brave people or this people or that people, and it wouldn't be me. And then I went to the non-violence training, and after the non-violence training, I was like, yeah, let's go. And that was about 3 or 4 years ago. But I would say it was only about a year ago, maybe more, that I kind of went kind of all in, if you will. I was out walking the dog. So yeah, just over a year ago, just before the Insulate Britain campaign started. And I was thinking about what the world will be like in, say, 15 years. Well, we don't know how many years time do we? It could be 25 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 3 years, we don't know. And I was thinking about what social collapse looks like. And, you know, what would happen to me? Would somebody come in and kill me, or would I starve? Like, what would happen? And all of these like horrible scenarios were going through my head, and I was thinking, like, what would I do in that moment? And all I kept thinking was, God, I wish I could go back in time. Let me go back just a few years and I will do whatever it takes. And then I kind of came out of my little thing and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm back in time now. It's 2020 or it's 2021 and I can actually do stuff. And that was kind of quite a terrifying but liberating moment. And the last year has been incredible. It's been amazing. I've never felt more alive than I have done in the last year, when I've just taken all the risks that have come my way, never said no to anything because I've been worried about the personal consequences, because I'm supported by loads of people, friends, some family, not all family, but a lot of family, and the people that I've met are just incredible. Don't get me wrong, it's not all sunshine. It's scary, it's really quite frightening at some times, but you find the joy in everything. A few months ago, somebody came round to the house to arrest me, which was terrifying, while I was in the shower, and they had to chase me up the stairs while I was naked, which at the time was terrifying, but I look back, hilarious. So you kind of like find the joy in all of these things, and they're the kind of moments that kind of keep you going. But I don't want people to think I'm particularly special or particularly brave, because it's not that at all. I think I've just made the connection more than some other people have, and I think we could all challenge ourselves to push through our fear barriers as much as possible, because no one has ever, that I know, has ever regretted any kind of thing that they've ever done. They've always been so glad that they did it. And I have got a little quote to share, which is, courage is not the absence of fear, but the assessment that there is something more important, which is Franklin Roosevelt. And I don't think there's anything more important than the climate crisis, and because it affects everyone, we know what's going to happen. I also found out not that long ago, okay, in my previous life, I didn't know anything about social change or civil resistance or anything like that. I didn't even know about apartheid. It's terrible. But now, over the last few years, obviously, I've learned quite a lot more. And I also found out a few months ago that in Germany, during the 30s, between 15 and 77,000 people were executed for resisting the Nazi regime. And that absolutely blew my mind, because we don't learn about that in school, do we? About resistance and how to like deal with, you know, evil things that go on in the world. They don't want us to know. They want us to know that. And I learned about Sophie Scholl, who was 20 in her university, and she was executed at the age of 21. And some of her last words were, "How can we expect righteousness to prevail if there is hardly anyone willing to give themselves up individually for a righteous cause?" And that is what I think about whenever I feel scared or nervous about anything. If she can do that, then I can probably sit on a tanker for a few hours. yeah, so next year, Just Stop Oil and the A22 network, which is a bunch of countries that we all work together doing civil resistance in our countries, are going bigger and harder than we've ever been before, because we have a responsibility to do so. And it's going to be really scary, but we're all going to do it together, and it's going to be phenomenal. And I feel very hopeful about the next year. So if nothing else, I ask you, if you haven't already, please come to a non-violence training, because it will be the single most empowering thing that you ever do, apart from taking an action. And yeah, I'll leave it there as well. Thank you so much as well for having me.
Well, thank you so much, Gabby. It was such a deep and profound way to end this night, with your personal story and hearing about how you went through emotionally as a person through this journey. And yeah, big respect to you. And yeah, we'll be watching you and supporting you all the way through. And so right now, the most exciting part is coming. So stay on, because we are going to go into small groups and discuss what we heard and how we feel about that and how you can get involved. And there are many ways, and we are all really, really longing to have you all in our teams, because for 2023, like I said at the beginning, we have huge plans. And we need everybody now to come on board. So what's going to happen? We are going to go into breakout rooms. It's not scary. It's going to be really fun. It is an opportunity to share how you feel and reflect on everything that happened. All of you are going to have 2 minutes to share what you thought about the speeches and where you feel your energy is right now. I would encourage everybody else who is in the room with you to really just spend this time to deeply listen to the person who is speaking without interrupting with any questions or comments. Just really allow everything that's being said to settle in you and really deeply have that information come to you. And then when it's your turn, you're going to have 2 minutes as well to share everything that you would like to. So yes, please make sure that everybody takes part equally. And then we are going to come back in 15 minutes. And going to check out and wish each other a good night. But just to remind you all to come on board with us, either Just Stop Oil or Animal Rebellion. There will be some links shared where you can sign up to take action next year. And also there are going to be links shared to donate to us. And just to remind you all, the best way you can support us with your donation is to donate us an hour of your wage at a monthly basis. That really helps us going month by month, so we can carry on planning and bringing on these massive actions in the new year.